What's good out there, Liquid Trucking? Welcome into episode 31 of the Liquid Trucking Podcast. I am your host, Marcus. Thank you all so much for being here today, and thanks for staying safe out there on the road and following all of those safety protocols. You know, we talked about that stuff a lot last week, a little bit of a PPE conversation. It's actually going to work its way into my conversation this week, which I'm very excited about. And we might as well just get into what we're talking about this week. You know, back when we were first putting this podcast together, Jason told me, hey, it's important to make sure that every now and then we got to call Chris out at Barto and see what's up at Barto. And that's why the episode is called, What's Up, Barto? We want to know what's going on out in South Sioux City, Nebraska. And so today, joining us on the show, I'll have the terminal manager, Chris Baltushis. I'll have administration assistant, Angie Reed, and I'll have load planner, Cory Liles, all from the Barto Terminal, coming on to give me just a straight-up update. What's it like down there? How's the freight market treating Barto right now? It's a great conversation, and it's nice to get to catch up with these guys every now and then. You know, we talked to Cory Liles on this podcast a time or two. He's always been gracious, but we've only had Chris on one time, and I don't think we've ever had Angie on before. So we're going to kick her into the pool today, see how she takes it. I'm sure she'll do fine. If she can handle the pressure of a terminal like Barto and as busy as they get out there, she can handle this podcast. We'll take it pretty easy on her. So looking forward to that conversation coming up here after a little bit. And something else I also want to tease a little bit that's off in the future. We've got a couple of great episodes planned coming up after this one. And I just want to make sure here by checking my calendar that I have the correct episode order. We do. So next week on the podcast, and if you're listening to this and you're thinking, hey, this would be a real good one for me to be involved in, get in touch, because this won't be the last version of next week's podcast that we do. We're going to bring you a podcast next week called Sage Advice, and it's a really cool thing that we're going to do. We're going to put on a vet driver, a liquid driver that's been here. He's been through the gauntlet. He knows the ropes. He's got it all figured out. Any way you want to put it, we're going to get him on with a new liquid driver. Maybe not somebody that's just fresh out first week or two on the road, but maybe somebody that's gotten their feet wet a little bit, couple months in it. And we're going to get some advice from one driver to another. Open it up to let the new driver ask as many questions as they want, and make sure that the vet driver for liquid can set some things straight, give any kind of clarification or tips that he has available. So make sure to stay tuned. Next week, episode 32, is our Sage Advice episode, and trust me, it's going to be a good one. Those of you that have been driving out there for 20, 30 years might be able to pick up some tips just as well as those of you that have only been driving for 20 or 30 days. There's going to be lots of tips in that episode as well. So again, let me remind you, that's not this week's episode. That one's coming up next week. It will launch on the 26th of June. And then we're done with June. And after that, we get into a 4th of July special, which we're cooking up all sorts of fun stuff for you guys there. I bet you didn't know I was a poet, did you? Well, I'm not, but I still wrote a poem. So that'll be fun. We'll also get a special company announcement there, and just talk to you a little bit about what it means to be an American on the 4th of July. So that's what's coming up in the future. But first today, we are going to focus on Barto. So, coming up right now, my conversation with Chris Baltushis, Angie Reed, and Cory Liles from the Barto Terminal in South Sioux City. Check it out.
Welcome to the gold standard of podcasts for the gold standard of drivers. This is the Liquid Trucking Podcast with your host, Marcus Bridges.
Joining me next up here on the Liquid Trucking Podcast, I'm very excited for this segment because we haven't checked in with them for quite some time, and I got the whole crew here with me today. We're going to check in with the staff over at Barto. And first off here, before we welcome the other two guests, I want to welcome somebody making their first appearance here on the Liquid Trucking Podcast, and that is Administration Assistant from Barto, Angie Reed. Angie, thank you so much for being here with us today. We really appreciate the time.
No problem.
I've also got somebody joining me for what I think is just the second appearance he's made here on the podcast. That's Terminal Manager out at Barto, Chris Baltushis. Chris, we appreciate the time as well, my friend. How have you been?
Oh, been all right. Busy, trying to keep trucks moving.
I hear you. Busy as always out there, especially with the small staff. And we've also got load planner Cory Liles on the line. Cory, you've been here with us a lot, man. Welcome back.
Thank you for having me. As always, it's a pleasure.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you guys all here. So let's just start off from the top, Chris. What's up, Barto? That's the title of the entire episode. You said you're trying to keep everything rolling out there. How's business out in South Sioux City right now?
It's actually pretty good, pretty steady. You know, I mean, we've since added a rail facility up here, so we've got that going. Trying to bring in new vendors and more freight. And looks like the market is holding on pretty good, so we're keeping guys moving. Every day you just got to be first on the spot to get the load so you can get them to your drivers, keep moving.
Absolutely.
It's a dog-eat-dog world, man. We're all wearing duck-bone underwear.
Yeah. I hear you there. And Cory, I guess as a load planner, you're probably you're one of those dogs out there trying to eat the other dogs, yeah?
Sometimes. Chris is the pit bull, so he sees things that nobody else sees. Hey, did you see this load? Yeah, so he sees it and grabs it, and I figure it out.
Perfect.
So.
Well, it seems like a well-oiled machine out there. Angie, how's it trying to keep these two dogs wrangled up and in their pens every now and then?
Oh, it's just a full-time job in itself.
Well, I'm just glad to have you guys on here. We can talk about it a little bit. Chris, you mentioned the freight market. You said freight's hanging on for you a little bit. It's not quite like that for everybody out there. I know dry van's really struggling right now. LTL's coming back a little bit, but based on what you've seen here trends-wise over the last 6 months or a year, regardless, it doesn't really matter. What's your prediction for the future? Because we're sitting here at the kind of what seems like the bottom, and we keep saying we're at the bottom, and then the bottom keeps dropping out on us. But it sounds like things are going okay for you guys out there.
They are. I mean, we've got established customers that we've had for years. Our business model really never changes. You take care of your, current customers, and they'll take care of you. You're always, like I say, trying to go after more freight, more volume. And once you prove to the vendors that you can handle it, they seem to just keep coming back because they know that we've got a good caliber of drivers, we got good equipment, and we have good staff to make sure that their deliveries are on time, safe, and efficient. So, I mean, that's really all we could do as a company is continue on that business model and keep growing the current business we have and new business as well. And like I say, we can't do it without the staff that we have.
Absolutely. And tell me a little bit about the rail. You mentioned that when we were welcoming you on. How's that changed business since it was installed?
It's made us with, one of the vendors we're working with up there. It's made us more efficient as a carrier for them, and it's opened eyes to other vendors to see that we can mold our business to fit their needs. So we've got other eyes on this facility, and it'll just grow the trucking side as well as the rail side. So basically, it's the two businesses will be shaking each other's hands, so to speak. So it's going to benefit the trucking company, and it's going to benefit the rail yards. I mean, they're going to work hand in hand. I don't know how else to put it.
Yeah, everybody wins. No, it's well put there. You kind of touched on an important part of this whole equation, Chris, and Angie. I want to go to you here for this, and that's that customer service aspect. It's not something that we talk about a lot on this podcast, but it is something that we've mentioned a few times, and the importance of it, I think, sometimes gets overshadowed by safety and making sure that everything is working properly. How does the customer service aspect play into it, Angie, when you're talking about holding on to those customers so you can keep that business close? And how much do you have to do with that? The reason I'm asking you here, Angie, I'll give a little insight to everybody that's listening. We were about to jump on and do the recording, and a customer walked in, and we waited for Angie to take good care of them. So that's kind of why I'm posing this question to you, Angie.
And customer service is a big part of it. You got to keep your customers happy. You got to keep, have a good rapport with them in order for them to keep coming back. So, we do what we can within our abilities to get our job done to keep the customers happy.
Sure.
Keep making them want to come back to us.
And with a smile on your face, too. You know, when I came into the office there, you were smiling really big. I think that's a huge part of it, too. You've got one of those smiles that just kind of relaxes everybody in the room. At least it did for me. I can say that.
Yeah. Oh, it definitely personality has a lot to play with it, too.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think one of the big things with the customer service is the adaptability and flexibility. It seems more and more, the customers that we deal with, they know if they have an issue that we're going to get it fixed and get it taken care of and make sure that they look good to their customer. And I think that dependability that our customers have come to know, Barto, you see it more and more every day. It's, I think it's a big part of the, it's a big part of the success for, how we maintain those customers because they know we're here to take care of them.
And how do you kind of instill that and keep that thought process moving forward with the drivers, Cory? Is it something that you're constantly having to hammer? Is it something that you guys have gotten in their heads? They just know and it's just part of the daily job?
It's part of the daily job, but our drivers know, in trucking, you have to be adaptable. The only constant is change. And, they may get dispatched on a load and something else changes, 20 minutes later, they have to adapt and switch gears and, head a different direction out of nowhere. And I think that the drivers adapt very well. They handle change very well. And overall, our drivers are all about it. They're here to get it done. They don't complain. They know whatever we need them to do, they're here to do.
Absolutely.
So we have them for 14 hours a day, and whatever we need done in that 14 hours, they're here to accomplish that for us. So it is, it's a toolbox, and you have to use the tools that you have. And so our drivers are probably the most handy tool we have, obviously, but they're all about getting the job done.
Well, it's well put there, and you can tell. There's a certain pride that I hear in the voices of Liquid drivers and Barto drivers right there in that same vein, and you can tell that they are prideful in working for the company, and it's a company that takes care of them, and they're willing to bend over backwards for the company, and I think that's really cool. And it's cool to get to be a part of it, to be honest with you. If I could be candid for a moment, every day it renews your faith in just the workplace environment to hear of a company that's as big as Liquid is, that started as small as it did. And now, you've got OFC, Schmidt, Barto, Liquid, everybody working in concert, and everybody seems happy. It's like, I tell the guys sometimes, if you could bottle that and put it in a spray, I think there's a lot of companies out there that could use it. At least some that I've worked for in the past, but we won't get into that. Chris, as the weather changes, how does the freight that you're hauling change? Anything really drastic switch up between winter and summer freight as far as Barto is concerned?
Your model changes a little bit. We'll get into the summertime. Our chemical will slow down just a little bit, but you'll get into more liquid feed because, the pastures are, being overrun with cattle and they're knocking it down to the dirt, so they got to feed them supplements. So you'll get into more of that. You'll get into some, summer fill fertilizers, and then we get into road oil up here. We do some work for a company that does asphalt work, so that'll help fill in the gaps up here to keep our guys moving. It just, like I say, over the years, you figure out what works and you just go with it, and you keep them happy, you keep your guys moving, and the seasons always change, A penny a pound in the liquid business will kill you. That's a known fact, and it's been that way for as long as I can remember. One vendor might have it this month, the next vendor's got it the next month. They might have their own truck, so you might lose it for a month, then you get it back the month after. Just, the name of the game. But like I said, we find enough to do, keep everybody busy, and everything changes. So like I said, summer's coming, and we're going to start getting into road oil, a little more liquid feed, a little more fertilizer. Chemical will slow down a little bit, and we'll be right back into chemical again, and the fertilizer and the road oil and the feed will drop off a little bit, So it's just a big revolving door.
Absolutely. Now, I've got to ask you this, and I will be careful here because I know that there's some things that we can talk about and some things that we can't. But Chris, you told us quite a few stories about happenings at Barto when we were there, getting to meet you and just getting to kind of walk around the lot, check out the wash bay and everything. Are there any crazy Barto stories that you can share on the podcast that you'd like to that have happened recently? It's been a long time since we talked to you, so I want to give you a chance here to fill us in on any anything crazy that we might need to know?
No, I tell you, man, it's been pretty easy going. I really don't have any new crazy stories. All my stories are, old and outdated like me, but they're my stories. But I got nothing really new and exciting, man. It's just, it's been pretty good. We've been pretty fortunate up here. Nothing's really hit the fan, so to speak. Everybody's doing well, and I really got nobody to talk about. So
okay,
everything's good.
Well, that's good. I mean,
and safety's huge. No news is good news.
Yeah, right. Okay. Well, how about this, Cory? I'll turn it to you and Angie as well if you want to chime in. Are there any drivers that you'd like to shout out for their performance or just for being rock solid on the job, or anybody at all that maybe it's a customer that you'd like to shout out or anything like that? I want to make sure that we cover all the bases here. And, there's a lot of people out there making this machine go forward. So please, if there's anybody you'd like to give some accolades to, floor is yours.
We're fortunate that every Barto driver is a fantastic driver. You have hiccups here and there, but shout out to all of our drivers. They're the ones that make us who we are. So shout out to all of them. Now, however, your last podcast with all of the teenage hotline, I think the only one that wasn't one of my drivers is Polar Bear, but the rest of them I get to sit here and listen to every day. So yeah, shout out to those guys. So that's quite comical at sometimes. I use their hotline to mess with some of them. Mr. Yoder, you know who you are. He's extremely gullible, and I get in his gif all the time.
Oh, man. And I could tell. They're all over that poor guy. Wendell, he's my guy, man. I felt it. I felt it in his voice. You could hear the dejection from time to time, but I'll tell you, he's got broad shoulders, man, because he just sits there and takes it, and he gives it back when it's due.
Yeah, I'd say he has a few cuss words off mic sometimes, I would say.
Angie, have you ever jumped on the teenage hotline to scold anybody or to just to get a feel for what it's like in there? I mean, I was on the phone with those guys for 40 minutes, and at the same time it felt like I was only on the phone for 2 minutes with them. It also felt like I'd been on the phone for 4 hours with them. I think because I was just fatigued from laughing the whole time. But what about you, Angie? Any experience with the boys from the teenage hotline?
No, I have never gotten on that hotline. I've enough drama in my life with a 10-year-old girl, so I stay away from that.
It's probably a good idea. And I understand, we had 5 of them on, but it sounds like there's even more than that, Cory.
Oh, I'm sure there are. Yeah. So those are probably the 5 main ones, but I get clicked in quite often for comical pranks against one of them or a few of them. So it's a good time. Those guys are fantastic. They do a good job. And like I say, they're all Barto drivers except for Polar Bear. And Polar Bear, if you're listening, this is an open invitation.
Yeah, I imagine so. But there's probably going to be a fight in the parking lot to see who gets them. Part 1 up in Plattsmouth, part 2 down in South Sioux City. I like it. Let's set up the cage in the parking lot. Let's get out there and rumble a little bit.
Bring it on.
Yeah,
I'm game.
I know you Barto boys are willing. You're cracking your knuckles already.
Yes.
So, Cory, I wouldn't be doing my job right now if I didn't follow up on something that you just said. You said you get clicked in for some pranks from time to time. Once again, we have to be careful with some of the things that we might say here, but are there any of those pranks that you can share with us on this podcast?
Like I say, Mr. Yoder, he's quite gullible. I know he does not want to have to do his 34 out. Like, he'll almost cry like a school kid sometimes if he has to be out. So knowing that, there are times it opens the door for me to mess with him on what his next load's going to be or where he's going to have to end up. And so, and there's buy-in from a couple of the other guys on the hotline, so they already know what's going on. So he doesn't know that I'm listening. So I get to hear, both sides of it after I'll send him his load plan or dispatch, and I'm already on the hotline listening to his response. So it's a good time. He cusses me. It's wonderful.
He cusses you while you're sitting there like a fly on the wall listening. That's equal parts sinister and hilarious, Cory. I'll give you credit for it.
Oh, it's a good time. It passes the day.
I'm sure.
Love you, Yoder.
Hey, man. And we appreciate those guys for coming on. That was such a fun episode, as I said. And I can't wait. We'll get them back on again. I won't be able to keep Polar Bear off this podcast for too long, man. He has a good time, and we love having him on. So we'll get him back in again for sure. Entertaining episode. Chris, I'm going to go back to you now because I feel like we've covered a lot of the business, but as the weather turns, You know, my first question for you is going to be, how's the riding right now? You're a Harley guy. You been out there cruising around in the sunshine yet?
Well, hell yeah. It's pretty nice riding weather right now. It's not too hot, a little windy, but ain't nothing like getting your knuckles up in the breeze and going.
Any notable road trips that you've taken recently or anything like that?
No. I don't really plan any road trips. I just go, you know. I do a couple 100-mile ride on a Sunday or something like that, but otherwise, I just go. Just get on and go.
Well, I feel like
That's what makes it fun.
Right. And I feel like it's a good time right now. You know, we're constantly talking about safety on this podcast, and when we're talking to somebody that rides, it's a good time to remind everybody that there's going to be a lot more motorcycles out on the road as June turns into July and so on. As a rider yourself, Chris, do you have any tips for the drivers that are listening about safety around motorcycles this time of year?
Yeah, don't blow your lawn clippings into the street.
But I don't want them in my car.
Oh, I didn't even think about that because it messes up your traction, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah, you'll put a bike down really fast on grass clippings. That's the best advice I can give anybody out there listening is just please don't blow your grass clippings into the street.
Okay, and Cory, you said you don't want yours in the yard, but you also told me you're on a farm, so maybe you should get a goat.
I don't need goats. They eat everything, man. I got stuff I don't want to eat.
Well, that's an interesting point there, Chris, because I'd never heard that before. And I've asked a lot of people, both on this podcast and others, about safety tips having to deal with motorcycles. And that's one I've never heard before, having motorcycle riders in the family. Have you actually seen somebody go down on grass clippings before?
Yes, I have.
Man.
Yes, I have. Out on some pretty nasty, twisty roads up on the countryside, and come around a corner, and it was just nothing but grass clippings. Watched a full dress bagger go down, and guy climbed on it and rode it like a horse till it stopped. I mean, luckily he wasn't hurt, but boy, his bike was messed up.
Oh, wow. Well, fortunate that he wasn't hurt, but RIP to any of those parts on that bike that didn't make it out of that. That sounds rough, man. And I know those things aren't cheap either, so.
Yep. That's about the best advice I can give anybody, you know, out there listening, guys that don't ride. That's just, you know, pay attention when you're mowing. Don't blow it out in the street.
Well, sage advice there for sure. You don't want to cause a motorcycle accident, and definitely not when you're in your truck either. So make sure you're keeping an eye on your mirrors for those guys and watching them. Obviously, some of them are good riders like Chris. Other ones are idiots like all the four-wheelers you deal with out there. So just one more bit of stress to remind the drivers about, but also a good reminder. And not to mention the stress that Cory's going to add by playing a joke on you, Wendell, and making you think you're going to have to take your 34 out on the road. So, I mean,
it's coming.
It's coming. It's always coming around the bend. Well, listen, y'all, I really appreciate your time. I know you're busy. I know you got a small staff out there at Barto, and keeping the machine running as smoothly and as efficiently as you do is a lot of work. So I'm going to let you get off here first, but Angie, I'm going to go to you first. I always like to do this at the end of every interview. If there's anything you'd like to say that we didn't get to talk about, or if there's a message you'd like to send to the drivers, any family or friends that might be listening, any employees, Angie, the floor is yours. Please take as much time as you'd like.
The only thing I have to say is to the drivers is you need to remember to punch in and out when you arrive and leave places.
That's great. No,
because that's what I do, like, full-time. That's a full-time job.
Okay.
Keeping up with their times.
This is so good, Angie, because normally when I open the floor like this, people say, hey, everybody's doing a great job. We love y'all. Be safe out there, which is great. But it's also good to make sure that we say that. I mean, that's the whole reason we're talking to you guys. So punch in, punch out, because it's costing you a lot of time.
Yes. I mean, other than that, our guys do great. They go above and beyond. They do what they need to do, to get home safely to their families. And, I don't really have any bad things to say about our drivers because they do a really great job.
Yeah, and that sounds consistent across all three of you here. Cory, it's your turn. The floor is yours.
Ooh, you know how many drivers I've had this year already asked me, please, I need to stay out of the chemical suit? We do chemical here at Barto, guys. Stay hydrated. Carry your water with you. It's going to be hot. You're going to be in the suit. You got PPE. Stay hydrated, guys. It's going to be a hot summer.
Yeah, it is.
We appreciate you.
Yeah, it is.
Stay hydrated.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Always, man. Keep water in the truck. You never know when you're going to have to put that suit on and stay in it for hours at a time. And we've heard some horror stories too, so make sure to stay hydrated out there on the road. And thanks for that, Cory. Chris, it's your turn now, buddy. Anything to say before we let you go?
Yeah, same as last time, man. I'd like to thank every single driver. You guys do a heck of a job for us. We could not be where we're at without you. Please stay safe on the road, get home to your families, and we'll do it again next week.
That's awesome. Chris Baltushis, Cory Liles, and Angie Reed from the Barto Terminal down in South Sioux City. Really appreciate all of your time today. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast with me.
Thanks, Marcus.
Thank you, sir. Nice talking to you.
Great stuff there from the team out at Barto. Can't thank them enough for coming on the show and giving us just a nice general update and sharing with us some of the little things that we don't know. You know, we talked so much last week on the teenage hotline segment, and we didn't get anything about those guys from those guys about Barto, and 4 of them are Barto drivers. So we just I gotta make sure that my glasses are cleaned and make sure that I'm checking in with Barto more because it's always good stuff from them. Love getting to talk to Chris. I wish I could share some of the stories that Chris told me when I was actually at the Barto Terminal. I'm sure a lot of you listening to this podcast have heard those stories, especially if you're a Barto driver. But if you ever get a chance with him when the mics aren't hot, sit down and listen to some of the stories Chris has, because not only is he a phenomenal storyteller, but the stories, I got these hot dogs on the back of my neck, you know, just because I'm 40, so I'm not quite as lean as I used to be. The hot dogs on the back of your neck will hurt after you've sat in a room with Chris Baltushis for a while telling stories. He's really got a few of them that'll make you giggle. So thanks to all of those people. Once again, Angie, Chris, and Cory, really appreciate the conversation and the time that they spent with us. You know, I told you earlier in the show, I'm not a poet, and I'm not. But one thing I did do a little bit of when I was working in terrestrial radio was gather some news. And I thought, hey, we haven't done like a top-down bulk news segment for a while. What's going on in liquid transport? Not just what's going on with liquid trucking. And I tried to put some stuff together. I'll be honest with you. There's a sort of a shortage of information as far as maybe just news stories and news coverage that deals specifically with liquid transport. But there is some stuff out there. And so I kind of tried to compile as much information as I could. We're going to talk about a whole slew of things here. We're going to talk about the freight market just a little bit, some future forecasts. I've got some parking facilities updates for you with new facilities and also tech integration and safety improvements we'll talk about. And I have an accident report. It's got about 6 major accidents that have happened here recently, as well as we will talk about some major traffic updates. So think of this as it's not necessarily only focused on liquid transport when we're talking about accidents and we're talking about traffic updates. That is more trucking in general. But when we get down to some market news and some market reports, we'll focus in a little bit harder on the liquid and bulk transport area, so that I'm not just giving you guys a bunch of news that you don't care about. Because honestly, that's like my worst fear, is to just sit here and talk and have you guys tapping on the steering wheel like, when's this idiot going to shut up? I get enough of that here at home, to be honest with you. So here we go. Let's actually jump off the top with some major traffic updates. I've got 6 of them here from 6 different states. We'll start off with everybody's favorite state. Oh, wait, how can I forget this? It's my sweet little news button. I'm going to play it again just because I feel like it. It's something about that sound that's just soothing, even though almost every time I've heard it in my life, it has just been followed by absolutely tragic or devastating news. This stuff, not so much, at least not for the people that aren't currently involved in these traffic issues. So coming out of California, first off, for our major traffic updates across the United States, traffic on major highways like I-5 and I-10 has been heavily congested Due to ongoing road construction projects, truck drivers should plan for delays and even consider alternate routes when possible. Now, those of you that have spent some time driving up and down California know that I-5 runs from Mexico all the way to Canada. So it's kind of hard to plan an alternate route unless you want to hang out on the 101 for the entire time. But I know that you savvy drivers out there, especially those of you that spend significant time in California, definitely know your way around. So there are probably a few alternate routes that you can take that's going to skirt that heavy congestion on I-5 and I-35 out in California due to all that road construction. Based on my experience driving through California, I will tell you that that's never going to finish, and you know that as drivers. That's just ongoing construction in perpetuity. Don't expect it to go anywhere anytime soon. Just expect to have to deal with it. Moving on to Texas, another state that some of you love to drive in, and some of you would rather not drive at all than drive through Texas, all 800 miles across or whatever that state is. The I-35 corridor, again, I-35 runs through Texas too. A crucial route for liquid transport has seen increased traffic due to a rise in commercial activity and seasonal agriculture transport. The reports say to expect longer travel times on I-35, especially near major cities like Austin and Dallas. I don't really think that this one is giving us a lot of things that we don't know. Traffic on I-35 in Texas is tough near Dallas and Austin. Also, an update for you. The sky is blue and water is wet. Moving on to number 3, in Florida, hurricane season has caused some disruptions, particularly on I-75 and I-95. While these routes are now mostly clear, ongoing recovery efforts may still impact traffic. And as we'll get to with some weather reports a little bit later, that's the time of the year it is. It's hurricane season in Florida. And even if they do get all these disruptions cleaned up on I-75 and I-95, you're still likely to see disruptions because it's just like, you know how the clock, there's 2 1 o'clocks in each day. There's one in the afternoon and one in the morning. Well, I think that's similar to what they say in Florida about hurricanes. Did you enjoy that one? Did it miss you? Well, don't get too comfortable. There's another one coming around the bend. It's hurricane season in Florida. Just be glad that you're not getting belted by tornadoes like they are in the Midwest, because when I see tornadoes in Florida, I think flying alligators and flying Florida man, for that matter. So let's just keep everything on the ground in Florida, but do keep an eye out. I-75 and I-95, still some hurricane recovery efforts that might slow traffic up a little bit there. Let's go up north to Pennsylvania. I-80 and I-81 have seen heavily increased congestion due to summer tourism and road maintenance projects. Truckers are advised to check traffic updates regularly in Pennsylvania and plan for potential delays. What's unfortunate about this one is, when it's cleanup after weather or it's heavy construction, unless you're in California, you can maybe think that there's an end date to this. There will be an end date to the tourism in Pennsylvania as soon as it dumps a bunch of snow or rain on them again. But as for right now, clear skies and lots of tourists out in Pennsylvania for the foreseeable future. And of course, road maintenance projects, that's just a thing every place you go. I'm talking to truck drivers here, as they put it, preaching to the choir. Let's move on to our 5th major traffic update up in the state of Illinois. We've got construction on I-294 around Chicago, which has led to frequent bottlenecks affecting transport schedules. Alternative routes are recommended for those passing through the area. And I think based on what some of you have told me about driving through and around Chicago, alternative routes are always heavily favored so that we don't have to drive right into the death trap, the gridlock that is Chicago, Illinois. But it sounds like I-294 particularly has got a lot of bottlenecks on it. So if you can stay out of or off of I-294 when you're in the Chicago area, that's definitely going to save you some time. Good luck with that. And finally, we go to another state that people just love to talk about, how they hate to drive in it, or at least one spot specifically. We're going to head down to Georgia, which contains the city of Atlanta, which is like top 3 on the list of people hate to drive there, especially truck drivers. So heavy traffic on I-20 and I-75 near Atlanta, imagine that, is causing delays primarily due to increased freight activity and urban expansion. Drivers should remain alert for sudden slowdowns, and you all know what we're talking about there. I'm talking about a Dodge Charger doing 70 and then doing 2. It happens very, very quick. Maybe it's a Challenger. Either way, it's going to have that Hemi engine in it, so it's going to go really fast until it doesn't anymore. Watch out for it when you're hanging out, again, on I-20 and I-75 near Atlanta. We'll get into some accident reports now. These are recent accidents that have happened. It looks like I've got 6 of these as well. One in Texas. A tanker truck carrying hazardous chemicals overturned on I-10 near Houston. This was actually last month. It caused a major spill and road closure for several hours. Thankfully, no serious injuries there. In Ohio, a milk tanker was involved in a multi-vehicle accident on I-80, leading to minor injuries and significant delays as crews worked to clear the milk spill and debris. No confirmation on this yet, but I heard the debris were just nothing but Oreos and chocolate chip cookies. Can totally understand that. You can bet your ass I'm going to be on the side of the road next to the milk spill with a bowl of dry Cinnamon Toast Crunch, because you got to be careful with the Cinnamon Toast Crunch. You can't go pouring too much milk on it right away. Little spoonfuls at a time. In fact, the best way to eat your Cinnamon Toast Crunch, and I didn't even expect to update you guys on this during our comprehensive top-down news report from the bulk trucking industry, but if you can get yourself a bowl or a glass of milk and then a bowl of dry Cinnamon Toast Crunch and just kind of drizzle the milk into it with a spoon a little bit at a time, it's going to change your life, all right? I don't know how much cereal eating experience you've got, but this dude probably got about as much as you, and that's the way that I found to really enjoy my Cinnamon Toast Crunch. Moving on to the state of New Jersey, a fuel tanker caught fire on the New Jersey Turnpike. We all saw this. In fact, I think we even reported this story on this podcast. This has been a while ago, resulting in the shutdown of the highway. The driver was able to escape without injury, thank God, and the fire was contained quickly, but that was a wild one. Figure we might as well put it up here. It sounds like recovery efforts and repair efforts in that one are all underway or complete. I know that was underneath of an overpass, so high likelihood that there was going to be some sort of shutdown or something either up on top of the overpass or down on the interstate beneath it to try to make sure that everything was still safe moving forward there. So keep on the lookout out there on the New Jersey Turnpike. Now let's head on down to the desert where things are real fun this time of year. In Arizona, a tanker carrying diesel fuel collided with a car on I-40, causing a spill and long traffic delays. The accident did lead to minor injuries and required hazmat teams for cleanup, but it sounds like the cleanup efforts there are well underway or complete as well, and no major injuries coming out of that one. Always something that we like to hear. Down in Kentucky on I-65, a liquid nitrogen tanker skidded off the road due to icy conditions, leading to a partial road closure. Fortunately, there were no serious injuries, but traffic was impacted for several hours. This one, again, something that didn't happen incredibly recently. It was back a little bit, but sounds like they were able to get all of that cleaned up and everything back to normal on I-65. And finally, in Michigan, we got a food-grade liquid tanker overturned on I-94 near Detroit, spilling hundreds of gallons of milk. Again, cleanup process caused significant traffic delays, but no injuries were reported, and maybe a couple happy Cinnamon Toast Crunch eaters if we got lucky. This is actually really cool because it's parking facilities update time, and I've actually got some for you. Several new truck parking facilities have opened across the country to accommodate the growing number of trucks on the road. These facilities include more spaces for tanker trucks and improved amenities like restrooms, showers, and dining options. Starting out in Texas, a new truck stop along I-35, which is definitely our most popular interstate in the report today, offers expanded parking for tanker trucks with over 200 spots and additional services such as a maintenance shop, and a driver's lounge. Out in Ohio, a renovated truck rest area along I-80 now includes more parking space for tankers along with enhanced security features and better lighting. And you guessed it, California making another appearance here on the list, but for good reasons. Along I-5, a newly opened truck plaza provides extensive parking options and a full service center for truck repairs and maintenance. We're always happy to hear about it, and we will report about it whenever there's new truck parking spots that we find out about right here on the Liquid Trucking Podcast. Many truck stops, of course, have been integrating tech into their offerings to try to help drivers find available parking spots in real time. That's an important one. Apps and online platforms are being used to reserve spaces ahead of time. So it's definitely something we should look into because if people are getting a leg up on you and you're not finding any spots, it may be because they're just hopping into the app an hour before they roll up and they've already got a spot reserved. I'd like to hear from some of you on that. If you're out there, you're an OTR driver and you've heard about these apps or these different platforms, online platforms that people will use to reserve a parking space, I'd love to know about that and hear a little bit more about how it works. So make sure to reach out to me about that. Let's see. Freight market news, demand and rates. Let's get into that. The demand for liquid transport has been steady as of late, with a slight increase in rates due to higher fuel costs and a shortage of drivers, which is kind of something we're always looking at. The average spot rate for liquid bulk loads has gone up by about 5% compared to last year at the current juncture. As we said, the driver shortage is something the industry continues to face, which affects the availability and cost of liquid transport. Companies are offering higher, better wages, more miles, that type of thing. Or you could find a company like Liquid Trucking that pays you by the hour and really get your money's worth out of your time. I mean, it's who's banging the drum for Liquid? Not the guy with the Liquid Trucking Podcast hat on. I can't imagine. Finally, regulations. New safety regulations are being implemented, which include stricter requirements for tanker inspections and driver training. These regulations aim to reduce accidents and improve overall safety of liquid transport. I didn't get into exactly what these regulations are. Figured just a general update there because Liquid's going to tell you what the updates are. Your company's going to tell you, and sometimes companies have different standard operating procedures where this stuff is concerned. I didn't want to give you something from some news outlet that's not going to pertain to you. So if you're wondering if there are any new standard operating procedures, just look out for your message. The company will definitely let you know. And finally, the last thing I went into was kind of future forecasts. And I don't ever look to get too much out of these because, listen, we're all throwing darts out here and kind of throwing darts in the wind when you think about it. I'm a betting man. I love to gamble. I'm a craps player. I like blackjack, poker, slot machines, Pie Gal. I don't even know how to play that game, but let's go for it. 3-card poker, whatever you want, I'm in. But even I am not willing to gamble on some of the future forecasts because the same time that you'll have somebody that is basing their information off of a study and they're really excited about what they've got to say, somebody else on the other side of the fence will tell you the exact opposite. And that's the nature of predictions. That's just the way that it is. But there are a lot of people that make a lot of money to forecast this type of stuff. And so I guess I'll read a paragraph on market growth right now that says the liquid transport market is expected to grow steadily, driven by the demand for oil and gas, chemicals, and food-grade liquids. The global liquid bulk transportation market is projected to expand at a rate of around 4% annually over the next 5 years. Let's hope. I would love to see that. I would love to see better than that. Let's expand. Let's take that 4 up to 10. Look, I know that's wishful thinking, but as my mom always used to say, if wishes were horses, beggars would ride. And it took me until I was like 35 to actually realize what that meant. But yeah, we got our fingers crossed here. 4% annually over the next 5 years sounds great. Am I putting any money on it? Yeah, I'm a gambling man. I love to gamble. Let's go. Let's put money on it. But that's not really a good thing to follow. I would say do your own research, read up on it. There's a lot of really good information out here. I have actually found recently that the S&P's Transportation Journal is a real good place for news on the transportation industry. But of course, you always got to watch out. Is the narrative driving these stories, or are the facts driving these stories? Can't tell you. Not a journalist. I'm just here doing this podcast. I do like to dabble in a little bit of journalism, but I'm going to leave the hard stuff to the experts. I hope that you've enjoyed this kind of top-down, all-encompassing update on bulk and liquid transport news. You know, again, watch out for those traffic concerns out there. It's summer. Another thing I would remind you to look out for, we touched on it a little bit when we were hearing from Barto earlier. That's going to be motorcycle safety and also children on the road. Everybody's graduating. Actually, the day that I'm recording this podcast is my nephew's last day of school. So, you know, just keep an eye out. It's going to be a lot of kids playing in those residential areas. And the motorcycles, the bicycles, the skateboards, the jet skis, towing behind a trailer, towing behind a full-size pickup, it's all going to be out there. So keep your eye out this time of year. Stay safe and keep the shiny side up. And one more time from my soundboard. That's your comprehensive news update here on the Liquid Trucking Podcast. Aside from that, I think we can probably wrap this bad boy up in a nice little package, put a bow on it, drop it into a liquid tanker, and have it delivered on time with premier customer service to wherever it's headed. Thank you all so much for being here today. I want to thank Chris, Angie, and Cory from Barto again for being here. It's always a pleasure to hear about what's going on out there in Barto, and we're going to make an effort to get those guys on the podcast a little bit more frequently in the very near future. But it is important to remember they've got a lot going on out there, and they've got a small staff that keeps them very, very busy. And plus, you know, a guy like Cory, he actually told me off the air, he says, wow, man, I got to finish up here and then go to my real job. It's like, wait, what's your real job? Well, he's got 20 acres worth of farmland out there to keep a hand on. So real job, and then go to sleep for 3 hours, and then to another real job, and then sleep for maybe 10 minutes, and then another real job. That's the life of a guy working out at Barto. They're out there working hard, and we appreciate them every minute for it. So again, this podcast doesn't happen without those of you that come in and participate, and big ups to all of our friends out there in South Sioux City, Nebraska at the Barto Terminal. Can't thank you enough for coming on the show today. Don't forget to stay tuned next week for that Sage Advice episode. And if you're listening to this going, man, I kind of want to be on that, or hey, I have a question, send it in, podcast@liquidtrucking.com. If you want to be on the podcast, it's pretty simple. You can email us there, podcast@liquidtrucking.com. Or there's a landing page on liquidtrucking.com's website. Looks great, other than the big picture of me that's on it. But right at the very top of the page, liquidtrucking.com, you can click the link that has got a picture of me and says learn more about the podcast, and it will take you to all sorts of fun stuff. We'll have all the pictures that we talk about on here. Each episode is up there for you to listen to if you want to. And of course, we get some contact information up there as well so that you can reach out and let us know that you want to be on the podcast. We'd love to hear from you. Also, look out on your text machine, whatever that is. For most people, it's a phone. I have access to be able to send you guys like a mass text. So I might be polling you guys for questions in the near future. Maybe I've got something that I'm not sure I need a driver's take on. Maybe I'm looking for a driver to come on the show and do a driver profile with me. Or maybe I'm just asking you guys what it is that you would like to hear on the next episode of the podcast or one in the future. So keep an eye out for that. And do me a favor, man, even if you don't want to participate or be on the podcast in any way, shape, or form, hit me back. It's always good to hear from drivers. I got drivers out there that drive for this fleet that text me all the time. Mike Stanfield, Alex Shevchuk, Drew Hearn. These guys I'm always in touch with them. Polar Bear's got my number. If you want it, reach out to one of those guys and they'll give it to you if you don't already have it. And if you do already have it, feel free to use it. I'm always available. We might run on little different time schedules since I'm out here on the West Coast, Best Coast, but that doesn't mean that I won't get back to you in due time. So look me up, Liquid. It's been fun. Episode 31 of the Liquid Trucking Podcast is in the books, as am I. I got to go study. For nothing in particular. I just feel like it would do me a bit of a solid to read a little bit more in my life. So I'm going to go read. We'll see you guys next week. Thanks so much for being here. Keep the shiny side up and stay safe out there, Liquid. We'll talk to you next week.
Thanks for tuning in and being the gold standard of drivers on the road. Be sure to like and subscribe to the channel and tune in next week for another episode of the Liquid Trucking Podcast.